He's passed away at this point. His name was Rodney Stark. Really studied an awful lot of stuff about religions, deep studies of the origins of Christianity, et cetera, et cetera. In his own studies, 1 out of 1,000 religious startup movements succeed beyond 100 years. 1 out of 1,000. So imagine, and we're right now in the 50th year, coming up on the 50th year of the disappearance of His Divine Grace. The primary disciples of Jesus Christ actually started writing their Gospels between 40 and 50 years after the disappearance of Jesus Christ. We are all here 50 years from the disappearance of His Divine Grace. We could have, we should have, we could have, we would have, we should have started getting a little bit more serious about this topic 10 years ago, what to speak of 20 years ago or 30 years ago. One person, by the way, can make a huge difference in this world. Now, I'm probably not going to end up making the kind of difference that Srila Prabhupada made, but one person can make a difference. So I want you to keep that in your mind's eye, that you might be able to make a difference, not only in your own life, but in the life of ISKCON. So this was developed by the Organizational Development Committee. As we talked about, the 4 generations, we are classifying them as generation number 1 is Srila Prabhupada. Generation number 2 are his disciples. These are the original pictures that we put into this, and you might notice who's kind of like front and center on that picture. Okay. I didn't put it there for this meeting, really. We just put it there 10 years ago and happened to notice, oh, hey, it's Ramapad. Hare Krishna. Disciples of his disciples are the 3rd. That would mean the majority of the people in this room. And the disciples of his disciples, anybody initiating that you've not yet? Okay. So, and by the way, Srila Prabhupada wanted to see thousands and thousands of gurus. So that's the definition, okay? So, main challenges. Establish a movement, and this is for the first generation, Prabhupada. Create a tradition, okay? The beginning, previous institution becomes obsolete. Now, I don't want to speak it so strongly obsolete, because the Gaudiya Math is, even to this day, performing nice spiritual activities, but Prabhupada tried so hard to work with the organization that had drifted down from the time that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur departed. And he wanted to serve his Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta, and couldn't fit in. So he decided to just come to America, and actually, even in the beginning, continued to invite Gaudiya Math members. It didn't work. So sometimes organizations become a little bit obsolete. Now, it, certainly happened with the Vedic milieu that was going on, and Buddha came up and said, hey, we're going to let the Vedic stuff sit for a while, and we're going to bring about something new. We have, the Jesus Christ taking the Jewish thing 5 steps, 10 steps forward. We have Muhammad The Arabian Peninsula had all kinds of sub-religion, et cetera. He just, boom, took it to the next stage. So we see that happening. And of course, what we have is Srila Prabhupada coming and bringing the entire Gaudiya Vaishnava heritage with him and starting a worldwide movement. Was trying to find a major institution in today that was established by a 72-year-old with $6 and coming and not knowing a single soul to the, middle of the lower levels of New York City. I couldn't find one, actually. I was doing Chat GPT. Let me see somebody who is that old, who established as big a thing in 10 years as Prabhupada did. Amazing. So the driving force, the personal qualities, the revelation received by the founder, this is, core stuff that the first generation Srila Prabhupada gave us. The style of governing, the charismatic, intuitive, being so intuitive as to adjust here, adjust there, every step of the road, come up with a new thing, okay? Very powerful entrepreneur. From a spiritual perspective, the best, okay? Unique contributions of the founder, he demonstrated the experience of spiritual reality. He gave his followers this deeper vision. Many of Prabhupada's disciples joined for many different reasons, but a fair amount of them were seekers. And some of them knew a fair amount of world religion. I know I did. And when I read the Bhagavatam, after reading every single book on spirituality and religion in the library of the university that I went to, it was like, okay, yeah, this is the truth. This is the reality. So he's revealing the truth at every step, and he's rethinking the old traditions if they need to be rethought. And he's rooting the old tradition in a new circumstance. It's very powerful to be able to do that, to take that old tradition and anchor it, root it into a new circumstance. And divine favor. So, of course, there's the notion of Jesus having divine favor. There's the notion of, and, we sit back and we look, objectively speaking, from a spiritual perspective. Who was Srila Prabhupada? He had to have had divine favor to be able to accomplish what he did. Sure, there's temptation, and, the devil tells, Jesus, hey, you could have this whole world, okay? And, there's an influx of new recruits, and they're coming like crazy. Prabhupada had to deal with them, and it wasn't always easy to deal with them. It was actually pretty hard on them, I think. There's always a danger in that, and remember, we're not just talking about Prabhupada, we're talking about spiritual movements in general. There's always a possibility of becoming overly dependent on followers. A person may have many disciples, but he should not act in a way that he would be obliged to any of them for some particular action or some favor. If one increases the number of disciples simply for some prestige or false honor, he will surely fall down. So there's a danger to that. The spiritual master must not be subjected to the advice of a disciple. Of course, spiritual masters take advice from their disciples on many practical things, but Prabhupada is really referring to the critical important things. So there's a danger to that, especially when you are trying to accomplish so much. What was Srila Prabhupada trying to accomplish? Coming out of Chaitanya Charitamrita, every town and village was his mission. Sometimes the followers challenge the founder's position, okay? You have the story of Jesus Christ in Judas and the Franciscan, Saint Francis, had revolt, after several revolts in his life as he was trying to establish the Franciscan order. And yeah, okay, maybe we didn't have to put a picture of Kirtanananda, because he did an awful lot to spread the movement and help Srila Prabhupada, but he also, was a challenging person, and other people challenged Prabhupada from time to time. So now we go to the second generation, and that is the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And, I built a skyscraper skeleton. Now you all intelligent American and European boys and girls fill in the spaces nicely in good taste and do not deviate from our high standard. So you could say that statement and many other statements and then overall directions that Srila Prabhupada gave to his disciples was to get this skeleton skyscraper filled out. Initially, it was focused on a few things, and then every disciple of Srila Prabhupada knows well that, we didn't have the internet. We didn't, you had to hear things either by telephone or by letter. But it was almost like every week or every 2 weeks, something new, something exciting was happening, okay? That Srila Prabhupada was doing this, Srila Prabhupada was doing that. So he was moving us forward while at the same time teaching us that we had to fill out all the things that were incomplete in this skeleton. The skeleton was solid, but now we had to do the finishing in the rooms. A person who knows building, for instance, has a tendency to look at the finishings also. So, that's why I was saying, well, this is a very nice building, because I examined some of the smaller things in the building, not just, a few nice lights and some nice paint on the wall. It's really nicely done. So, okay, now we have the Acarya leaving, okay? And this was a real trying time for the second generation. We had a very, very successful Rath Yatra in 1977. It was the second Rath Yatra, the first one being done in San Francisco. And I was the temple president at that time. And I never really spent any significant time with Srila Prabhupada. But then Mukunda, who's now Mukunda Goswami, and Narayan, I don't know if you ever heard him. He was big, guy. And myself, we were like the threesome that put all that Rath Yatra together. And the Narayan and the Mukunda said, look, we've spent a lot of time with Prabhupada. You take this book of everything that we just accomplished and go deliver it to him. So, I did that and stayed for 2.5 weeks. But then decided, I've served Srila Prabhupada almost exclusively in separation. The temple president of the largest temple, I gotta, he's gonna leave. We don't know when. I have to go back and do my service. at a certain point in time, November 14th, about 7 or 8 hours after Srila Prabhupada actually passed away, myself and Rameshwar got the call that he had left. So we all gathered together at the temple at the Mangala Arati, made the announcements, and I retreated to my office. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't want anybody to know that I was in the office. And I just sat there for about an hour and a half and came up with 2 conclusions. They were rock-solid conclusions. One was predictive. I think things are going to be different in my life than what I thought they were going to be, and they certainly were. But the other thing that I came up with was really carried me to this very day, which is Srila Prabhupada gave me everything I needed. And he has given you everything you need. He gave you Ramapad Maharaj, he gave you his books, he gave you what you might call the box of spirituality that we live within. He created that for you. So yeah, the challenge now for the second generation continues. Schisms, challenge of maintaining the unity. Devotees that have been here long enough know that there was a period of time that was called the zonal acharyas. Real tough times. Other things that have caused their issues. What you're seeing right here is something that happened to the Islamic faith. And it happened very soon after the Muhammad disappeared. One sect after another. To the point where now, if you're in one sect and you're trying to hang out with somebody from the other sect, good luck, okay? They'll kill those people just as much as they'll kill everybody else. Sorry for a political comment. If you manufacture whims and disagree and fight among each other, fight among yourselves, then it will be another edition of these so-called movements. It will lose the spiritual strength. You look at the major branches of Christianity. In fact, if you actually study the beginnings of Christianity in the first 100 years, I mean, it's like all over the map. One person is writing one thing that Jesus Christ said, another person is writing another. Politicians and or big influencers in different pockets. 50 to 75 to 100 years later, if you were in Antioch as opposed to some other place, you'd be thinking about Jesus Christ in a whole different way. What to speak of then when the Reformation came, boom. And the notion that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that notion didn't come into being until approximately 75 years after he had departed. And the notion that he is the sole savior of all of us, that notion didn't really come into place again for about 100 years. Joseph Smith, he lived a very short life. What is that, 1805 to 45? That's like 39 years. But actually started one of the fastest growing versions of Christianity. Of course, philosophically speaking, it's got some very unusual elements to it. If I'm married to somebody and then I have children, well, all of us are going to be together eternally and stuff like that. I don't know that much about the philosophy, but I do know that much. They already have schisms after a short period of time. And of course, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, two main camps broke off within a year of his departure and remain separated. And as a result, the beginning of a juggernaut of something very similar to ISKCON just retreated into little temple, little preaching, little, okay? There's some disloyalty to teaching that can take place. This has happened in a lot of different places, but one of the reasons it hasn't happened so much to us is simply because we have an incredible amount of detailed information on what's what. So you go here we have Christianity, right? It's like, somebody please just look up, is it 1.5 billion or 2 billion? 2 billion people call themselves Christians. Catholic Church being one of the more strongest, powerful, and long-living institutions, possibly the longest. Jesus Christ didn't leave anything in writing. And again, the main apostles didn't start writing something until 40, 50 years after his departure. So where's the guidance? But look at the guidance that we have. We have tremendous guidance compared to any other religion that's ever been started. We have more going for us. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have challenges. And that doesn't mean that we don't have problems. And we got to be aware of that problem, and that's why we're having this discussion. But what we do have is so powerful. We've had little disloyalties. Hopefully they won't become big ones, okay? The notion that certain people can become Ritviks, and when you then get initiated by that person, you become a direct disciple of Srila Prabhupada. That's, it's a heresy. And we have, a very successful, on the phenomenological level, a very successful person doing that. And maybe there's a couple of other, issues people have with teachings, etc. But big expansion, new charismatic leaders. I don't know. I would say, off the top of my head, there may be 10, I don't know, Maharaj, maybe you could tell me if it's more than 10 gurus that have currently more disciples than Prabhupada had. Something like that, okay? So, and they're charismatic, and Maharaj is charismatic, and change in management style can be challenging and can be necessary, okay? But there's nonetheless some change in management style. And this is the 1, 2, 3, 11, yeah, that's the 11, the original 11. Now everybody knows that not many of them are still standing today. That was the challenge, part of the challenge of ISKCON moving forward. Doubts about leaders' decisions. By 79, 2 years after the departure of Srila Prabhupada, you wouldn't have wanted to been a temple president. Doubts about the way decisions are taken. Enough doubts to the point where I would imagine that half of you don't even know the name of the current GBC chairman, because the doubts about our GBCs have become almost endemic, okay? Communication and chain of command difficulties, we've experienced these. Members feeling uncared for. Seems like everybody's happy around here, by the way. Well, I was just watching everybody coming in, having prasadam. Everybody's got a smile on their face. Kids running around like crazy. Leaders overburdened with routine work. Another way of saying this is the leaders have a span of management problem that they can't cope with at all. Can't handle the stuff that they're supposed to. And more decisions requiring specialized knowledge. The world has gotten more complex, and for us to be a responsive organization, we've got to be, more complex. We just can't be simple. We have to be simple and complex. And the change of the social and the political and the cultural and the economic thing. I'm doing a quick count, and it could be 4, maybe 5. Seems like there's maybe 5 people in here that are not of Indian descent. Yeah, so, it's like, is that a change? Yeah, a big change, New recruits come and go. We did a study one time. This was about 10 years ago. We took 3 or 4 gurus, and of course, they really didn't have excellent records of all their disciples, but we did a study, and at that point, more than 1/3 of their disciples had left. Now, don't forget, probably 20% of Srila Prabhupada's disciples left while he was still on the planet. So, that stuff happens. The need for horizontal relationships, meaning the vertical relationships have failed us, okay? Speaking with Jamuna Jivan, just saying, yeah, I love Chicago. Yeah, okay. Well, what's going on with the Chicago temple? Oh, it's going good. And who's the temple president? Well, they got a board. Okay. So, of course, what we do in ISKCON is when the vertical relationships just aren't working, well, what do? Well, sorry, we don't need a temple president anymore. We need a board to run things, okay? So that's how things work out, right? The vertical relationships don't work anymore. Collective preservation of the legacy, struggling on that. Need for clear succession mechanisms. Prabhupada's disciples have done some very good things to move the movement forward after the demise of his divine grace, after the disappearance of his divine grace. And then there's a good, strong, healthy list of things that they have not done. And you're going to see in this deck here pretty soon, it's all falling on you. The stuff that the second generation didn't accomplish, it's all yours to figure out now. Need for a culture of dispute resolution. We have so many fightings going on that then we have this wonderful devotee, Vajrabihari Prabhu, who just decided, hey, I'm going to try to help people resolve their... He does 700 cases a year. 700 cases a year. Now he also has a number of people that are helping him, and he's training them up. That's how many formal dispute resolutions are going on. Third generation, here you come. If the second generation, this is just what I was just saying, if the second generation has created a basis of unity and diversity, should know how to explain, okay, great. If direct witnesses to the founder's activities are disappearing. We ran a little survey on reading, which we're going to be talking about quite possibly today. When does this talk end? Oh, I can't talk. Let me give me a moment here. There's just the thought of talking that long is making me thirsty. We did a survey, and what we coulda, shoulda, woulda. Now that's the second time that I've said coulda, shoulda, woulda, and here's a little bit of a divergent to the talk. Do everything you can to never even think those words. Could, should, would. They're all excuse language, and it goes right along with try. Okay, try. Try to pick up this controller. I'm going to try. What does that mean? I either pick it up or I leave it alone, right? We don't try anything. Okay? We either do or we don't do. So a direct witness to the founder's activities, these are disappearing. So we would have added in how many people have read the Lilamrita, and then have read other of the biographies of Srila Prabhupada, and or watched a number of the memory tapes that Siddhanta Prabhu did. Because the direct witnesses of the founder's activities are disappearing. The movement becomes bigger and more complicated, definitely. And so all of this stuff lays out like this, okay? First generation, he's got to deal with issues. He's got absolute clear instructions. Context is always there for everything that he ever said, everything that he ever did. And his intentions were absolutely pure, without any question. And his intentions were clear, beautiful, perfect, etc. Okay, great. And then we move to second. Issues are there. The instructions are there. To a certain extent, the contexts are there. And then it's a question of, well, are we perfectly clear on the intention? Perfectly clear? So if we look at 50 years minus one of the activities of the second generation, Srila Prabhupada's disciples, we can spot indications that at times the intentions of His Divine Grace were not clear. Third generation, the generation that you are largely, you got issues that you're facing. Fortunately, you've got instructions. You have some potential to get some context if you were to take the time to really study the biographies and study. Part of the context is also in Srila Prabhupada's books. Srila Prabhupada's books are not just the instruction. They're also context secondary, but nonetheless there. But the biographies of Srila Prabhupada, they will help with the context. And, you know, it's a question mark whether you're going to fully understand the intentions. So then at a certain point, and this has already started to happen, some disciples of Srila Prabhupada are now initiating. That then becomes the fourth generation. And that fourth generation is already starting to populate. They're faced with issues. And the question is, how well do they know the instructions? And do they have the context? And do they have the intention? So they're at a disadvantage. Now, I'm speaking about ISKCON right now, but I'm also, remember, talking about religious movements in general. And that's why most of the time, startup spiritual groups fail within the first 100 years. This is exactly why this happens. So, on one hand, I guess I'm saying things, I'm making statements, I'm providing you with information. In one sense, yes. More importantly, either largely by implication, I'm asking questions. So let's just take a break from the PowerPoint for a moment and let me pose to you the primary questions that we are wishing to really think about between today, the time that we have together, and then tomorrow I have another session with you to think about these things. And I would hope that these questions resonate so strongly with you that you'll really remember them. So what does it mean to be a loyal follower of Srila Prabhupada? Some followers may be weaker, some followers may be strong, different qualifications of loyalty, different stages of loyalty, but to become a loyal follower of Srila Prabhupada. What does it mean to be a loyal member of ISKCON? And really, we have to sometimes then start to be able to answer that. We have to get a little bit better idea of what ISKCON is. And since I'm supposed to speak for such a long period of time, I think what I'll do is just talk about ISKCON for a moment. And that deserves, to talk about ISKCON deserves another drink of water. International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Krishna consciousness. Okay. Remember Krishna, never forget him. And then everything else, right? International, yeah, everywhere. Society. Is the word society synonymous with institution? No? Doesn't sound like it is. International Society for Krishna Consciousness. That's what this place is called. That's what this place is supposed to be. And the institution is an important aspect, an element of that society. So I'm not trying to say that the institution is not important. Srila Prabhupada made many statements about the importance of ISKCON from an institutional point of view. But when we start looking, for instance, at the original 7 elements that go into the original corporation, where, the purposes were to publish books. The purposes were to bring humanity closer together to Krishna. To build places of holy pilgrimage. What you don't find in those 7 purposes is anything that represents an institution. Okay? I don't know how many of you are disciples of Ramapad Maharaj, but some time ago, if you were to be initiated, you had to take the disciples course. Okay? And I have to tell you, the disciples course, whoever wrote that, did a meritorious job, because previously there wasn't anything. And that person, whoever wrote that, or that group of people, didn't understand that the word society and institution were not synonymous. So, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And what does it mean to be a loyal follower? Third question. Between these first 2 questions, are there any conflicts? Are there any difficulties? Are there any question marks in becoming a loyal follower of Srila Prabhupada and a loyal follower of ISKCON? There might be. I know I've had issues that had to be resolved between the 2. I know that Ramapad Maharaj has had some issues that he had to resolve. And fortunately, both he and I resolved those nicely, without a problem. But they had to be resolved. So it's a question that's worth answering. And then, well, that conflict actually really comes with, okay, we'll skip that comment. I'm going to move to the 4th question, and that basically is, what's the nature, characteristics, attributes of the 3rd, 4th, and all future generations of ISKCON members? What is the attributes, characteristics, and nature of your relationship with Srila Prabhupada? So these are the 4 questions that I'd like you to just think about. And be serious about these questions during this next period of time in your life. Be very serious about them. Okay. Crisis of authority, solidifying the teachings. We're still on the 3rd generation. The need for hermeneutics and exegesis. I've always mispronounced that word, but basically this means the meaning of things, okay? In the context of things, from hermeneutics is the philosophy of that, and then the practical application is exegesis, or whatever. Somebody know how to say that word? I always mess it up. Some people don't know. Some people say I don't know English very well. Danger. Inability to integrate different opinions and perspectives. We've all had, if any member of ISKCON that's the least bit awake has had some issue, right? And why? This is a spiritual organization. The temple is supposed to be a place of Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha means freedom from anxiety or something? like that? Yeah? Prabhupada said, no, Prabhupada said, there was one group of devotees that we were once working with, and we were attempting to help and serve them. And one devotee just had this fantastic idea to come up with a model for using Prabhupada's quotes to make a determination as to what policy should be created or what should we do or whatever. And it was very thoughtful, okay? In other words, nobody should be allowed to just pull the quotes that they like on a subject. They would have to pull all the quotes together and then attempt to reconcile all those quotes, right? The idea was largely rejected. Because devotees would like to battle with all of this stuff, right? Introducing ideas that may change the nature of the original movement. The main reason that this stuff happens, and it is happening from time to time in our movement, but remember, we're also talking about spiritual movements in general, is because the brain is not filled up enough. So in terms of an ISKCON devotee, brain's got to be filled up with the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. And if it's not filled up, then the intelligence and the mind are going to work up other ideas that come from either that person's history or whatever that person is reading or whatever. So this is like a real, very serious danger, okay? And I'm forgetting who he is. All right. Need for a codification of those teachings under the direction of the second generation. I said that there's some things that the second generation has failed us on. And this is one of them. This has not been codified. So we start looking to you to start to codify it. And you need to. The best example in our history is Jiva Goswami, the youngest of the 6 Goswamis, lived the longest in terms of age, not age, total age, although he might have lived total age, but he was very young and then outlasted the lifetimes of the other 5. And he brought all of that teaching of the 6 Goswamis into really beautiful things. Anybody who has ever read the the Tattva Sandarbha, what a faith-building experience it is to read the Tattva Sandarbha. It's like, wow. So, you know, let's say the best example of somebody to codify the previous Acharya's teachings. Of course, his guru was Rupa Goswami. Challenge of specialization. We have so many different things that we have to do. And leadership can't just rely on that single leader knowing everything anymore. If we go all the way back to the first generation Srila Prabhupada, whatever he said we followed, and on a practical level, he pretty much knew everything that was needed. We're not in that space anymore. The Catholics did something that, I don't know, maybe sometimes I think that ISKCON might consider as a methodology to keep everybody in under the same roof. They came up with orders, what they call orders. So, you know, the Franciscan order, the Jesuit order, All of them have their own little contributions that they're making in this way and that way. And they're all under the Catholic umbrella. And they're all recognized and are part of the whole Catholic ecosystem. 250 different ones. Anyway, that's how they chose to deal with that kind of problem. And to a certain extent, it's, okay, fourth generation challenge of practical social construction. We don't yet know what the social construction should be. We are, there's a genuine fight between the gurus, ISKCON as an institution, and the social. Okay, so if you think about all this, well, here's the gurus. What powers do they have? Here's the institution. Who owns this? My friend Conte Prabhu, I was spending some time with him and taking some guidance to refresh this in my mind, because I hadn't, read it for a while or talked about it. He was telling me a story that he still teaches at the GBC College for Leadership Development. Has anybody ever taken any of that leadership course? Okay, a few people. And a very senior and really well-known as a very, very good devotee, got into a very heated moment of time saying, who owns the congregation? Does the guru own it, or does ISKCON own it? And for a while, there was almost like an argument going on, because other people, have you ever heard the saying that the tyranny of or? Okay, the tyranny of or is that somebody comes up and gives you, it's either this or it's that. Well, but there might be a third thing or a fourth thing or a fifth thing, or there could be actually even 15 possibilities. So the tyranny of or is that in an argument or something like that, I'm going to say it's either this or it's that, and now you're going to start buying into that and start arguing like that. Okay, so here's who owns, okay? As if the congregation were like cows, and two farmers were going to be arguing over who owns this cow. Okay, I mean, you understand the madness of such an argument? I mean, really crazy. But these arguments are going on, and they go on historically too. The need for mechanisms for organizing social life where members aligned with the internal culture and principles. There's always some danger in speaking about generalities, because they, number one, aren't always true. Number two, they don't always hold for all people within that generality. But generally speaking, Indian-bodied people are pretty heavy on family, really going to raise the kids. It's probably wrong to say that you have a choice of whether you want them to be a doctor or an engineer or an accountant, but since you're laughing, maybe it's true, huh? Okay. Family life for the second generation was almost non-existent. And if you attempted to do family life during that period of time, you were classified as being in Maya. They had other words that they would use on you, bogus, things like that. The LA temple was just known in the early days as being the place to go if you wanted to be in Maya. Because on Sunday, everybody went off with their family to the beach or something, right? And you couldn't get them to go out on book distribution. And if you were the temple president trying to get everybody out on book distribution because Sunday was a big day, well, you know, you became the enemy of the householders. So, yeah, you have some of that kind of stuff going on. And then we have a major shift that happened some time ago. I don't know, somebody who is more familiar with the ISKCON level of individual temples would have a better guess, but I would say that it started to be prominent 20 years ago. And that is today, the majority of devotees, first of all, have families, and second of all, they've got jobs. They go to work 40 hours a week or even more. They've got careers. And so how does that affect this future of ISKCON? Okay. So that's like a real important thing. That's this association with the world. When Ramapad Maharaj and myself were brought up in ISKCON, and then for him, he followed a more advantageous path than I did. He's never really had to interface much with the world. And in the beginning, I didn't either. We left the world behind. We left the whole world behind. Most of you have not. You're involved in the world. So how does that change things? And change, by the way, is sometimes good and sometimes not good. So there's also very wonderful, potential, strong things that could be done with the fact that most of our initiated disciples at this point also have careers. But it's a challenge from the point of view of practice, because the practice of Krishna consciousness can get affected. At a certain point, I decided that it was a little bit difficult for me to deal with ISKCON directly, so I just became a member. And by the way, in those days, you couldn't really be a member. You were in Maya, okay? But I knew differently because, you know, I have an independent brain, and so I started working. And what kind of work did I have to do? Well, I never worked before. So I went out and I knew how to distribute books and was pretty good at it. So I just filled up a van full of records and drove around and sold records. It's pretty low level. And then at a certain point, my third child came, and I said, "Oh, man, okay, I'm happy he's here, but I really have to get into economic development," okay? So, you know, I started my first business, and then I sold that, and I started a second business, and then I sold that. I started a third business, and with that business, I, you know, kept growing that, and that kept growing, so I kept it. But I had to do all kinds of business, and I had to associate with people that I would not normally associate with. So there's a big challenge. We have to find the right answer. We have not yet found the right answer to this issue yet. This devotee, Yadu Nandan Swami, wrote a really wonderful book called The Sannyasis in Modernity, and meaning modern sannyasis. And hardly anybody wrote it. I mean, they read it a little bit and then they put it down because it was like a very important book, actually, showing the challenges. There's a need for apologetics. Apologetics is the arguments of justification. There are certain things in Prabhupada's books that need to be, justified. There are other things that we do that should be justified, okay? So that the society in general understands who we are and why we do what we do. This is like the biggest thing that we have to be concerned about. ISKCON has become strong enough, especially in some areas of the world, that the possibility that ISKCON as a building and as people going in and out of that building and it is going on, okay, that it's very strong that it's going to be there 50 years from now, and fairly strong it's going to be here 100 years from now. But what about the mundanity, the mundane aspect that keeps filtering in? That's where the big danger is. And then just to put in a task for the 5th generation, that's what they're going to have to significantly worry about. So that's our Fading Acarya presentation. Now, I said in the beginning, first of all, we're talking about spiritual organizations in general. We aren't really overly interested in understanding what happens to spiritual organizations outside of what could happen, and in some cases has happened with ISKCON. So therefore, there might have been a little bit of a mood or even the time spent talking about ISKCON, because ISKCON is really important to us. And whatever happens to the 999 out of 1,000 organizations that fail, we don't really care as much as we want to understand. We're born, we grow, we mature, we produce byproducts, we decline, we die. That's what this body-mind does. We all know it. We are all taught to remember that. Remember the temporariness of life. Don't just get caught up with your daily affairs in such a way that you forget, and then you wait until you are old enough where you're like me, where pretty much every day you get a good, strong reminder that your body and mind is, declining. Don't wait. So in the same way, we need to be aware of the fact that spiritual institutions can, in fact, decline and actually even die. We've spoken a little bit about the Gaudiya Math, but actually, there's been a number of occasions, even in Gaudiya Vaishnava history, from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I am told, I don't know this for a fact, but the person who told it to me is, totally trustworthy in my mind. That it took several years for Bhakti Vinod to find a translation of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was largely forgotten in the period when he was younger, in the 1830s or 40s. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that there are at least 7 known biographies of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that disappeared, that people remembered them and therefore they got recorded as being written, but they're gone, lost forever. It was approximately 40 years from from the departure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that finally somebody decided, hey, we ought to celebrate his birthday. And at that point, between the time that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu disappeared and the time that Narottam Das Thakur decided to hold almost like a conclave, but a gathering, and Janava Mata came and assisted him and actually was the primary or equal spiritual force of bringing everyone together that moved the Gaudiya Vaishnava thing forward again, because it was declining until that time. What is it called? Katuri? Huh? Okay. And that was the first Gaur Purnima celebration. As the story goes, also Narottam Das Thakur's brother should be also celebrated, because Narottam, of course, was the designated prince who was going to become the king, but he didn't renounce. But then his brother took over the kingdom on his behalf, and his brother created all the facilities for everything. So, yeah. The period of time, sometime after the disappearance of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, got strange. And Gaudiya Vaishnavism in many ways started to really have significant bad reputation, because there were so many Apasampradaya people. And Bhakti Vinod basically became a person that straightened out most of that stuff. So even within Gaudiya Vaishnava history, we have a fading Acharya issue. So let's take it real seriously. So what does that mean to you? Well, one way of looking at it is micro, meta, and macro. It's a decent methodology for thinking things. So on a micro level, you have you as an individual. On a meta, you have this temple, or maybe you belong to another one and you're just a visitor, but you have your temple or your community. And then on the larger macro, we have ISKCON and the broader Society for Krishna Consciousness. So on a personal level, what do you need to do? The beauty that we have is that Srila Prabhupada basically gave us everything we need. And on this personal box that we live in, which we don't move beyond that box, we have fundamentally two, but you could say three levels. There are things that are immutable, don't change, can't change. You were never going to change them unless ISKCON totally fails. Chant 16 rounds minimum, follow 4 rules and regulations, read, associate, worship the deity. If you can't live in the Holy Land, be conscious of the Holy Land. There's a few other things that are in that primary box. Primary. We have to spread Krishna consciousness. We have to participate, or we have to serve those that are. So that's just like a fast review. Tomorrow we're going to spend a lot more time on that topic. Okay? On the meta level, you got to make a contribution to this temple. You have to make this place, it appears to be vibrant, and the deities are, Prabhupada, when he would go to visit a temple, he always go and see the deities first and make an assessment of what's going on in the temple by way of looking at the deities and figuring out whether they were happy or not, or something. And make a contribution to the overall mission of the temple, et cetera, et cetera. Householders with full children and with full jobs might struggle to be as austere and sacrifice as much as other people that don't have those responsibilities. When we go and look at the second generation and how much they sacrificed to assist His Divine Grace in putting ISKCON on the map, that sacrifice was extreme. I don't even feel it's appropriate anymore for that level of sacrifice for householders in today's age. But we know what sacrifice feels like. It's a little hard. It's a little difficult. It's difficult. That's part of the definition of sacrifice. You're giving up something currently so that something in the future will be better. So sacrifice is a very important element of what's in that box that we live in. So, I'm supposed to talk for another half an hour. I don't think I'm going to be talking that long, but I want to go over one particular aspect of what we spoke about in this fading Acarya. If you remember, we had this simple graph. Issues, instructions, context, intention. So let's talk a little bit about instruction, okay? When we put this thing together, it was during a time that we had also, in 2014, we were just so happy because we felt that we were pleasing everybody, including pleasing Srila Prabhupada, because we had our first ISKCON ILS Leadership Sangha, okay? 500 devotees, 450 devotees came, and it was really great. And so then we had one every other year for 2016, 18, and 20. Of course, that then the COVID came, and then I think that they've recently resuscitated it to some extent, or maybe to a very nice extent. So we had put this thing together in 2015, presented it to the GBC. We presented it to the Leadership Sangha at the 2018, yeah. In that room, we had 1,300 leaders of ISKCON. They were temple presidents, they were, 1,300 leaders of different types. We gave that, and on the day that we distributed a survey, there were 1,100 people present. And we handed out a survey thing. Now, similar to the survey that we just got done taking on reading, not everybody responded, which is, of course, expected. So we had like a 420 or 430 of the 900 people that were in that room respond. The average age of not age in terms of years, but the average years of those people being a devotee, the average was 19 years. So it was a very mature group. Of course, most of these people were leaders, so you could expect them to be a mature group of people. 19 years. The average amount of time that they read the Bhagavad Gita cover to cover was 2.7 times. 2.7 times in 19 years, and they're a leader. We couldn't understand it. The average amount of time that they had read the Bhagavad Gita, the Nectar of Devotion, was 1.9 times. Srila Prabhupada brought the Bhagavatam, first canto, second canto, and then quickly, as book distribution got going and publishing got going, did reprints of those. The next book that he gave us was the Krishna book. By that time, he had had 2 heart attacks. He had some concern about his longevity. He wanted us to understand the 10th canto, but the traditional and proper way of understanding the 10th canto is to go through cantos 1 through 9 first. 1 through 9 in detail first, before you enter into understanding the pastimes. That's why you see in the Krishna book, roughly half the words in that book are admonitions to, don't think that this is materialistic, etc., and giving us caution on how we should view the pastimes of the Lord. He then quickly did a summary study of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the teachings of Chaitanya, and then he did the Nectar of Devotion. The Nectar of Devotion, if you read in the beginning, he goes through his introduction, maybe it's 4 or 5 pages, I can't remember. And he's talking to a person that doesn't know much about Krishna consciousness, and then he ends that purport, not purport, but he ends that introduction by saying, this book, Nectar of Devotion, is specifically meant for ISKCON devotees. So he didn't really put that book out for the public. He put that book out for us. And that was really only read on average about 1 time. Second canto, first canto together, 2.5, 3 times, something like that. I can't quite remember. The full Bhagavatam, 1.8. This is people who had been in our movement an average of 19 years. Your results for your survey are not that much better. I'm sorry to say. And what we just got done doing is spending an hour and a half going through, okay, here's the future of ISKCON as seen through the lens of Rodney Stark and a number of other people who have talked about what religious movements go through. And giving you a fair amount of very good examples of how real the concept actually is. And what we're hearing is the single most important thing is that you must understand the instructions of His divine grace to keep this movement together. So tomorrow, in an enthusiastic but nonetheless very serious mood, we're going to be spending time on what is it going to take for you to feel encouraged and take the time to become a reader of Srila Prabhupada's books. Because my sense of it, confirmed by one of you, just Jamuna Jivan, but I'm just going to accept him as an authority, is that it's more of time management and what you're facing because you have full-time jobs. Remember, you know, if I gave any description of my material self, I would include the word capitalist. So I understand what it means to have people working for me, and I understand what I expect from them, and I know what to do if I don't get it. Right? We only have 3 stages. We're happy with a person, or the person is going to be given a chance to reform, or they're out of here and we're going to replace them. So if you have a boss who then has a boss who then has a boss, well, that's how it's run. So we understand that. You understand it. I want you to know I understand it. I remember one time going to a temple, and I just happened to know the kind of car that the temple president was driving. I had arrived at the temple a little bit late. I walked by his car, and I saw his bead bag next to the gear shift of his car. I was thinking, okay. This guy's doing a japa drive. Now, don't get me wrong, I sometimes do a japa drive too, but it's a question of time. That's probably the biggest issue, not your intention, not your lack of desire. It's a question of balancing everything. So we're going to spend some time on that. We're going to spend time on time. Yeah. And we're going to be talking about what does it mean to be a follower of Prabhupada and try to define it to the best that we can with a group. And then we're going to be doing some breakout sessions too, which Jamuna Jivan has put together. Okay, so that's about it. Maharaj, I hope I haven't said anything that has displeased you. And I actually wrote down, you could see in my little notes, but I didn't check my notes before I started speaking. I actually was going to tell you at the very beginning, you can correct me if I end up saying anything you didn't like, and I forgot to say that, so I apologize to you. I hope I didn't say anything you disliked.
You pronounced his name wrong. You were saying doing it Jivan or Jivan, but he'll pronounce your name. You'll train him up how to say your name. I'm teasing you. You'd be happy to know that in the Naperville temple, it has been decided that in addition to the ISKCON disciple course and the letter of recommendation, to get the letter of recommendation, one has to have verified that they've completed reading Nilamrita. That's a prerequisite for first initiation.
Wow.
And you'll be happy to hear, you probably already know, but there's like a book report on the number of the other biographies. I've been, read those biographies. And for the purpose of, this is just for your information, for your dealing with the audience tomorrow. I forgot, he took the microphone away. My memory just went blank.
I have senior moments.
No, it's you know what it is. Anyway, I'll remember because I'm going to go to a third thing is, I'm a little disappointed. I'm very happy with the people that came, but today I asked on the ride back after our, Ra program, Vyasa Puja program, that there were, what was the number you estimated? 400. I heard you say 450. 400, 450 people. That's not how many people are here now. Maybe they got, party fatigue. I don't know. Or that they ate too much for lunch, or I don't know what happened. But I'm hopeful that more people will come tomorrow. But I'm very happy that those of you that came, that you're here.
Well, I have a response for that. Of course, I didn't have any big anticipation of how many or whatever. So it's not like I was, not so many people or anything. That never crossed my mind. But my quick response to that goes like this. The odds are that of the people that did not show up, within this group, you probably know anywhere from 50 to 80% of them, and maybe even more. So they're your friends. They're people that you see that come to the temple on a regular basis, etc., etc. So this could be a mission that you could take up, or it should be a mission that you should take up, or you might take up that mission of spreading the important words that we've spoken about to these people. Because the message really is important. It's not my message. It's the message of what we got to do.
There's one other point. This is for your information point for tomorrow particularly, and that is, as there's the phenomena of bhakti vriksha groups, I'm sure you've heard that terminology, it's now become very, very prominent to have reading groups. And then, it's not necessarily a big reading group. It's a group of this many people and then they add a person or someone else drops or something, but they regularly, very consistently read together over, and then cover the Bhagavatam by reading groups or whatever is their book of choice. It's very common. So that's something that could amplify and expand and proliferate and for, time management people.
Yeah.
Because it's the social aspect of getting together and reading and sharing their understandings, with a cutoff time because they're busy. But it's a good model to grow the reading together.
Yeah.
And it's trendy, popular.
And it helps. If you don't do a lot of reading, then there's sometimes you're not getting a big taste. Taste is so important, right? When we put together the first cookbook, it was called Higher Taste. When we have, Bhagavad Gita, you give up the lower taste by having the higher taste. So you got to have a taste for reading. Otherwise, it is a little difficult. And you got to get through that period of time when you don't have some taste, if you're in that condition. But the taste when you read with others is easier to have. It's easier to have that taste when you're reading with others.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like kirtan.
and one of the social as well as the musical as well as the holy name, the three parts.
Mm.
So it's reading groups. It's
Yeah.
a nice tool. Meeting.
Okay, we're good? Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much. This was a very, very profound, entire lecture so far, and I'm sure there will be wonderful next tomorrow. So, while the legacy of the previous generation, a lot of lies on the soldiers of all of you, how you guide us, but then also it should be given in the hands of newer generation, because the world, the way it's changing, newer generations are equally smart to figure it out. So the institutions should create projects, demands them to deliver certain things, and let them figure it out. Given the problem statement, and let the institutions let the young generation to figure it out. Maybe they can do very differently a miracle, exactly what we wanted them to do. So that's number one. Number two, when you define the people associated with ISKCON, the 1/4 type of people that we always tend to ignore in the ISKCON is that the people who contribute to build this temple. So they are not regulative principle following people, and they have their own, like we all have our own life to live. They live more their lives, but they contribute significant money towards the temple. The older generation temples were built through selling books and devotees like yourself. But these temples are built by these people, who with their hard money they have donated. So there is no place right now ISKCON has created for them, how to engage, how to bring them. So I just wanted to call these two out.
Okay, well, as just to be responsive to your point number one, yeah, well, you're going to end up having to take over things whether we like it or not, because we're already halfway out the door. But part of my message is, you better know what you're doing.